Hey guys, ayahuascaeasy.com here with another video. In this one, I wanted to talk about the cost of ayahuasca retreats in Peru, South America, where I undertook my ayahuasca ceremonies. Um, basically, I can give you a straight up answer uh, straight away as to how much they were. I looked at 9 ayahuasca retreats online. One of the 9 I have been to before, and is the retreat that I went to, Santuario, near Pucallpa in Peru. I looked at 9 retreats, and I found that they were between $90 and $233 per day in price. And the sort of quite large range of prices there, I think, can be attributed to two things. One, some sort of more upmarket than others in terms of the accommodation and activities provided. And on top of that, some retreats simply include more in what they're offering. So some are quite basic in terms of they're just offering, ayahuasca ceremonies and not much else. And others might have other medicinal um, plants that you can incorporate into the ayahuasca, as well as yoga, or one of them even had an on site doctor, those types of things. So there was a lot of variation in terms of price, but also what you were getting included for that price. So definitely, when you're shopping around for ayahuasca retreats, excuse me, um, I take that into account. I didn't really particularly want too many extras. I just wanted the ayahuasca ceremonies. So, Santuario was perfect for that. Let's have a look at what we got in this article here. I'll link to this article below in the description. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about there was how you actually get to the retreat. And the reason why this is important is because um, for many people, going to South America is an expense unto itself, and so you can save a bit of money if you know a couple of ins and outs, in order to just sort of lower the cost of the flight there. Um, I've linked to an article, a Scott's Cheap Flights article, that describes how to go about getting lower fares. But in summary, more or less, you can get better rates by booking early, or booking well in advance, being really flexible with the dates that you do travel, just to take advantage of like weekly variation or daily variations within the week of fares. Um, and also, Scott's Cheap Flights specifically has like really good deals if you're flying from the US, for example, where many people are going to um, South America for ayahuasca. Many people are coming from the States. You can definitely get some very cheap flights out of there. And Scott's Cheap Flights is sort of more sort of tailored for American customers. So the deals tend to be sort of North America specific, I find, at least. Um, the other thing you want to take into account is whereabouts in Peru you're actually doing the ayahuasca retreat. Um, in my experience, there's two main centers. The biggest one is Iquitos in the north of Peru. That's the main sort of epicenter of ayahuasca retreats, and that is actually quite far away from Lima. And the reason why it's important that it's far away from Lima is because if you're flying internationally into Peru, as at the current date, it's sort of the middle of 2019, Lima is the only international airport in Peru. So you have to fly into Lima if you're entering into Peru from another country via air. And in that case, you have to then catch another internal flight from Lima up to Iquitos. And that's obviously going to add an additional cost to your trip. Um, so, um, You could do it in Iquitos and pay that extra money for a flight, um, or you could do it in Pucallpa, which is a little bit, well, quite a bit closer to Lima um, than Iquitos. And while you can still get a flight there, it's a lot cheaper of a flight, but also it's possible to get a bus there, an overnight bus from Lima. So if you did ayahuasca retreats in or nearby Pucallpa, then you can save a little bit of money on the internal flight, or indeed get a bus. And then I thought I would just I won't go into too much more detail about this article. I'll link to it below, and you can read more about the exact sort of pricing breakdown that I've done here. You'll see here that I've got a list of notes just saying that, hey, I haven't actually been to most of these retreats. I'm purely looking at them based off of their online presence. The exception to that is Santuario Houston Retreat, um, which is the one of the 9 that I have actually been to. I'll leave you to go ahead and check the website for these. And what I've done is just sort of gone through each one and sort of talked a little bit about it, some pros and cons and stuff like that. My opinions of the pros and cons based off of the websites. I'll leave that link in the description. You can check that out. The other real quick thing would be that I think it's important to note that price is not the only factor in choosing an ayahuasca retreat. Obviously, it's like a very personal experience, and ayahuasca has become, very famous and very sort of lucrative in South America, and therefore there are, sort of shyster shaman and retreats out there that are either dangerous or not practicing good sort of safe practices and whatnot. So pricing alone and looking at the websites to sort of gauge um, the appropriateness of that retreat for you in particular, like I've done in this particular article. I've only been to one of the 9 retreats. Doing that isn't really enough of a enough to get a good idea of whether or not the retreat is going to be good for you or not. So what I'm suggesting here in this article is that the best retreat that you can find is probably one that someone you know and trust has been to and therefore can recommend to you. That's how I found Santuario, and that was a good way because not really being in this world previous to going to Santuario, I wouldn't have really known how to sort of like select a retreat. So long story short, pricing is not the only factor. Um, in order to avoid some of the dodgy or unsafe retreats that are out there, I think it would be really good if you could find someone that who's been to one that he would recommend, and then that might be a really good way to sort of navigate more safely your selection of ayahuasca retreats. So I'll leave it at that for now, guys, and thanks for listening.